The engine hummed steadily beneath me as I steered the taxi down the familiar streets of Oak Ridge, my hometown. It was a Tuesday, mid-afternoon, and the air had the usual crispness of January. Nothing out of the ordinary for a driver like me. Another day, another string of rides, each one as forgettable as the last. I'd been doing this job for over a decade now, picking people up from offices, bars, and homes, shuttling them to where they needed to go. The humdrum of city life blended with my own routine, clocking in, clocking out, no surprises, no fuss. But today, I had a feeling. A gnawing sensation in my gut that something was going to break the monotony. I pulled up to the next call, checking the screen on my phone. A notification popped up with the passenger's name, Rebecca Johnson. My wife. I froze, a cold shiver creeping up my spine. Rebecca hadn't used my services in years. Hell, we lived together. She'd always had the car, the freedom. Why would she need a ride now? A second notification pinged, reminding me it was the same address from the other day, a place I recognized too well, the upscale part of town where we used to take walks on lazy Sundays. I pressed the accept button, fighting the strange tension rising in my chest. I shouldn't have gone. I should have ignored it, let someone else take that fare. But curiosity clawed at me, my foot already pressing down on the gas. The drive to the address was only a few miles, but it felt like an eternity. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the wheel a little too tightly. The streets blurred by, each stoplight a heartbeat, every turn an ache in my chest. What was I thinking? Rebecca never used taxis. What if this was some sort of mistake? No, I knew better than to fool myself. Something felt off. I passed through the quieter streets until I reached the familiar block where her call had originated. The house in question belonged to a high-end real estate agent, a place that had seen better days but still carried an air of affluence. It was a quiet neighborhood, too quiet. The address was on the left, and I noticed a figure standing near the front steps of the house. My heart thudded in my chest when I saw her. Rebecca. She was laughing, her usual easy laugh, the kind that always made me feel like everything in the world could be okay. But today, it felt wrong. Too much lightness in her voice, like she was trying to convince herself. And standing beside her, in the way that only someone too comfortable can stand, was someone I knew all too well. David. My brother. For a moment, everything went still. I didn't even remember pulling up to the curb. My hands were shaking as I turned off the engine. There they were. My wife. My brother. Together. Smiling. Talking. Standing too close. I blinked hard, trying to swallow the lump forming in my throat. What was happening? This couldn't be real, could it? I hadn't been this shocked in years. The weight of it hit me all at once, the betrayal, the disbelief. I wanted to turn around, to drive away and pretend I hadn't seen it, but I couldn't. Something in my gut told me I needed to confront it. Needed to know what was really going on. With a shaky breath, I opened the door and stepped out. My shoes hit the pavement with a hollow thud as I walked toward them. The world around me felt distant, muffled. It was as if I were in a dream, one that I couldn't wake up from no matter how hard I tried. David saw me first. His smile faded slightly, his posture stiffening. But it wasn't enough to disguise the smugness in his eyes. The smugness I had seen 1,000 times before, when he knew he had the upper hand, when he knew he could get away with anything. Rebecca turned toward me, her expression shifting in that familiar, practiced way. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her voice, when she spoke, was too sweet. Too fake. Ryan, she said, her tone light, like nothing was wrong. What are you doing here? I wanted to shout, to scream at her, but I held it in. My voice came out cold, like ice had settled in my chest. I could ask you the same thing, I said, my words sharper than I intended. My eyes darted between her and David. The tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. What's going on, Rebecca? She hesitated, her lips pressed tight. The guilt was written all over her face. But she quickly recovered, plastering on that mask of sweetness that she used whenever she needed to cover up a lie. "We were just talking," she said, waving her hand as if to dismiss the whole thing. "David's been going through some stuff, and I was just helping him out." She glanced at David, who was looking away now, pretending to examine the front door like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "Talking," I repeated, my voice low. "Is that what you're calling it?" David finally looked at me, his smile gone now. "Come on, man," he said, his voice defensive. "It's not like that." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It's not like that. How many times had I heard that phrase in my life? It's not like that when he borrowed my things without asking. It's not like that when he snuck around behind my back with Rebecca. The rage I had been holding back exploded in a quiet fury, but I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, holding it between us. The screen displayed a series of images that couldn't be denied. David froze. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "I saw you," I said. "I saw both of you. Last night. At the motel." Rebecca's face paled. Her hand trembled as she reached out for David's arm, but he pulled away, his eyes not meeting mine. "How long?" I asked, my voice a deadly whisper. The question hung between us like a weight that neither of them could lift. Either of them answered. "Why?" I pressed. "Why him, Rebecca? After everything?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. And in that silence, the truth finally settled. She had no answer for me. The seconds stretched out painfully, each one heavier than the last. Rebecca and David stood there, both unwilling to meet my gaze, and I felt a bitter satisfaction in their silence. I didn't need them to speak. The truth was already in the air, thick and suffocating. I waited for her to say something, anything. An apology. An explanation. A shred of remorse. But nothing came. Instead, her eyes darted toward the ground, unable to meet mine, as if the weight of her own guilt was too much to bear. David, meanwhile, just stood there, his face blank, his shoulders stiff. I felt an overwhelming urge to break the silence, to call out their betrayal for what it was. But I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. "Is this how it was?" I asked, my voice calm, dangerously calm. "Behind my back the whole time? All those times you told me everything was fine?" I turned to David, locking eyes with him. "You really think I wouldn't find out, huh? You thought I wouldn't see you two sneaking around, thinking you could get away with it?" David shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck, but he didn't say a word. He couldn't. The evidence was there in the way he avoided my gaze, in the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice trembling, but even that wasn't enough to soften the edges of her words. "Ryan, please. You don't understand. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was confused." Her eyes were pleading now, desperate for my forgiveness, but I felt nothing. Confused. That was the excuse. How many times had I heard that one before? "You were confused?" I repeated, taking a step forward. "You were confused while you were lying to me, while you were sneaking around with my own brother? Is that really the excuse you're going to use? You're pathetic." Her face twisted, the facade of control crumbling for just a moment. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I couldn't be. Not anymore. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered again, but I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was already elsewhere, already plotting the next move. I couldn't stand there any longer, watching them lie to my face, pretending like everything could go back to normal. "Take your lies and get out of my sight," I spat, my voice dripping with contempt. Rebecca flinched as if I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. The only thing that mattered now was making sure she and David knew the cost of their betrayal. I turned and walked back to my taxi without looking back. They didn't follow me. They didn't even try. That was the part that hurt the most, how easily they let me go. The drive home was a blur of rage and disbelief. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I didn't care. My mind was spinning, too many thoughts, too many emotions clawing at me. I kept replaying the scene in my head, over and over again, until it felt like I was suffocating in my own anger. I couldn't believe it. I had trusted them. Both of them. My wife. My brother. The two people I'd spent my life with. And they had both betrayed me in the worst way possible. I pulled into the driveway of my house, the place I'd built for us, and sat there for a moment, letting the weight of it all settle. I didn't even feel relief, not yet. Just a deep, gnawing emptiness. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The house I'd once shared with Rebecca now felt foreign, like a shell of what it used to be. I walked through the rooms, not knowing where to go or what to do. It felt like everything I had worked for had been ripped away in an instant. But as I walked into the kitchen, something inside me shifted. The rage that had been boiling in my chest suddenly cooled into a cold, calculated resolve. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not without consequences. Not without making them feel the weight of their choices. I knew what I had to do. Later that evening, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone. I needed proof. I needed something irrefutable that would show Rebecca and David that I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I had to make them feel the cost of their actions, the way they had destroyed everything I thought we had. I pulled up the video footage I'd secretly recorded of their meetings, the quiet, whispered conversations, the glances they thought no one was watching. The motel. Everything. The evidence was right there, in black and white. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't just about them. It was about me. About my dignity. About showing them that I wasn't going to be the fool. I grabbed my phone and sent a message to David. It was short, simple, and to the point. We need to talk. Tomorrow. The Green Lion at 8. Don't make me wait. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. A sick satisfaction bubbled inside me as I imagined David, clueless about what was coming. He thought he could get away with it. But I was going to show him just how wrong he was. The Green Lion was a dimly lit bar on the edge of town, one of those places that looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s. It wasn't flashy or trendy, just dark wood paneling and old neon signs flickering overhead. The kind of place where people went to forget. And that's exactly what I needed. I showed up early, sitting at the bar with a drink in front of me, the amber liquid swirling in my glass. My mind was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let the anger take over. Not yet. I checked my phone. No reply from David. He would come, though. He had to. He always came when I called. I wasn't going to let him wiggle out of this. I heard the door open and looked up. There he was. David. His usual swagger was gone, replaced with a tense nervousness that I found oddly satisfying. He wasn't as confident as he liked to believe. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just a man who'd been caught. Ryan, he said, forcing a smile as he slid into the seat across from me. Good to see you, man. I nodded, not bothering to return the smile. Yeah. I'm sure it is. He raised an eyebrow but didn't press. He ordered a drink, then turned back to me. What's this all about? You sounded serious in the text. Serious? I repeated, letting the word linger. Yeah, I am serious. I leaned in slightly, making sure he could see the anger in my eyes, the quiet fury that had been building ever since I saw them together. You've really been enjoying yourself, haven't you? David's expression faltered, and I saw the flicker of guilt behind his eyes before he masked it with indifference. What do you mean? You know exactly what I mean, I said, my voice low, controlled. You've been messing around with Rebecca behind my back. And you think I wouldn't find out? You think I wouldn't catch on? David shifted in his seat, but he didn't speak. He was trying to play it cool, trying to hide the guilt eating away at him, but I wasn't having it. I leaned back in my chair, pulling out my phone. I've got all the proof I need, I said flatly, tapping the screen to show him the video. And you? You're just an idiot who couldn't keep his hands off what didn't belong to him. David's face turned pale when he saw the footage. He opened his mouth but closed it again, like he didn't know what to say. But his silence spoke louder than any words. "You've got nothing to say for yourself, huh?" I continued. "Not a damn thing to justify it?" He finally spoke, but it wasn't the apology I was expecting. Instead, he tried to backpedal, his voice shaky. "Look, man. It wasn't like that. I didn't mean to." "Stop," I interrupted, cutting him off. "You didn't mean to? Is that your excuse? You're my brother, David. I trusted you. And you threw that away like it was nothing." I could feel the tension building between us, thick and suffocating. David was no longer the charming, confident man I had once looked up to. He was just a coward, squirming in the face of his own guilt. I wasn't done. I couldn't be. "Here's the deal," I said, keeping my tone cold. "I'm going to expose this. I'm going to show everyone what you did, what both of you did. But not just for me. For her, too." David swallowed hard, his eyes widening. "Her? Who?" "Rebecca," I said, leaning forward now. "I'm going to make sure she feels the full weight of what she did. Both of you. Because you thought you could get away with it. But now you're going to see how far I'm willing to go." David's face strained of color. His earlier bravado had evaporated, leaving him looking smaller, like a man who had made a terrible mistake and now had no way out. "I can't undo what happened, Ryan," he said, his voice quieter now. "But I'm sorry. I was stupid." "Sorry doesn't cut it," I replied, my voice as hard as steel. "You don't get to just say sorry and walk away from this. There are consequences." I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out a way to get out of this mess. But it was too late for him. Too late for any of us. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, his eyes lowering. "I'm just trying to tell you the truth. But I get it. You're pissed. You should be." I gave him a long look, letting the silence stretch out, then finally stood up, leaving him sitting there, stunned. "Don't ever come near me or my family again," I said, my voice calm but lethal. "And pray I don't expose you." I turned and walked out of the bar, not looking back. The next few days were a blur. I could barely sleep, my mind racing with plans, schemes, and a deep sense of betrayal that gnawed at my insides. I'd confronted David, and while the encounter left me feeling like I'd regained some control, it wasn't enough. It couldn't be. Not when everything I had built had been shattered by the two people I trusted most. I spent the following morning drafting messages, emails, texts, and letters that I would use to make my next move. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to ruin their peace, their complacency. I wasn't going to let them think they could get away with this. Not without feeling the consequences. Rebecca texted me later that day. The message was short, almost robotic, and it stung more than it should have. "We need to talk. Please, Ryan. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I stared at the screen for a moment before deleting the message without replying. There was nothing she could say that would fix what she had done. The damage was done, and I wasn't interested in hearing her pathetic excuses. That night, I sent a carefully crafted email to David's employer. The company he worked for had a reputation for being high profile, and the last thing they wanted was scandal attached to their name. I included the video footage of the motel encounter, with a few select details highlighted about their relationship. I wasn't exaggerating anything. I didn't have to. The truth was damning enough. By the time I went to bed, I knew it would hit him. I knew it would hurt. But that was the point. The point wasn't to just make him suffer. It was to make sure he never thought he could pull something like this again. I needed him to understand the weight of what he'd done. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of missed calls and messages, none of which I cared to read. I didn't need their apologies or explanations. I was done listening. I was done being the good guy, the forgiving one. I sat in the kitchen with my coffee, scrolling through my phone, when the message from David came through. "Ryan, what the hell did you do?" I smiled to myself, reading it over and over. It wasn't about guilt or remorse. No, this was him realizing that the empire he'd so carefully built, his job, his reputation, everything he had, was crumbling because of one mistake. One betrayal. But this was just the beginning. The doorbell rang around noon. I didn't have to guess who it was. I could feel the tension in the air long before I opened the door. David stood there, his face drawn, his usual cocky demeanor gone. He looked almost small. His suit was a little too tight, his shoulders too hunched, like the weight of his decisions was finally sinking in. "Ryan," he said, his voice strained. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside to let him in, not bothering to hide my disgust. "Talk? What's left to talk about, David?" He hesitated, looking around, then at me. "Look, I know what I did was wrong. But you didn't have to go this far. You didn't have to." "Didn't have to?" I cut him off. "You and Rebecca destroyed everything. You destroyed me. Everything I've worked for. And now you're standing here asking for mercy? After everything?" My voice was low, controlled, but the anger behind it was clear. "I'm not asking for mercy," he said quickly, his eyes darting away. "I'm asking for a chance to explain. For you to understand that it wasn't what you think. We didn't mean for it to get this far." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, please. Don't tell me that. I've seen it. I know what you did." I reached for my phone and showed him the video again. The motel. The whispers. The betrayal. "You really think I'm going to just let you walk away from this?" David's face went white, and he stepped back, his hands raising as if to ward me off. "Ryan, I swear I'm sorry. It was a mistake, all right? I wasn't thinking. I don't know what happened." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice rising. "This wasn't some drunken mistake, David. This was calculated. Every step of the way. And you want to stand here and tell me you're sorry, like that's supposed to fix it? Like you're going to walk away and everything is going to be fine? I didn't want this," he said, his voice cracking with frustration. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't even think." "No, you didn't think." I cut him off again. "You didn't think about anything but yourself. And now? Now you're going to feel what it's like. To have everything you've worked for ripped away. I'm not going to let you get away with it, David. Not like this." He stood there, unable to find the words. I could see the fear in his eyes, the understanding that I wasn't playing games anymore. "You're going to lose your job. Your career," I said coldly. "I've already sent everything to your boss. They'll hear about your little affair. They'll know exactly what you've been doing. And then we'll see how you like being on the other side of this." David shook his head, his breath quickening. "Please don't do this. I'll lose everything." "You already have," I said, staring him down. "Now get out." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. As I turned and walked away, I could hear him stumbling out of the room, muttering something about how it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. But it was necessary. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I kept to myself mostly, letting the fallout unfold around me like a slowly unfurling storm. David tried calling, texting, but I ignored every attempt. Rebecca, too, sent desperate messages, apologies, pleading, excuses. I didn't need any of it. They had no place in my life anymore. David's employer reached out not long after I sent the email. The HR department wanted to meet with him. I knew it was only a matter of time before they let him go, but I still felt a strange satisfaction in knowing he would face the consequences. I wasn't done yet. I had more waiting to do. I had to ensure Rebecca understood that nothing she said or did could undo what she had done. I had been a fool for far too long, but no more. I wasn't going to let her twist things back into a comfortable, forgettable lie. A few days later, I got a call from her. She was outside the house, asking to talk. I didn't even hesitate. I opened the door and let her in, knowing what was coming. "Ryan," she said, her voice strained. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I never meant for any of this to happen. I looked at her, taking in every part of her. She was still the same woman I had married, the woman I had trusted, the woman who had become a stranger. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the hurt, still sat heavy in my chest, but I wouldn't let her see it. Not now. You don't know what to say? I repeated, my voice dry, almost bitter. You should have thought of that before you slept with my brother. Before you lied to me. Before you destroyed everything we had. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. But I didn't feel sympathy anymore. I felt nothing. You've taken away everything I thought was real, I said, my voice cold. This marriage is over. And don't think for a second that I'm going to forgive you. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered, taking a step toward me. Please, I'm begging you. I'm so sorry. I've never been more sorry for anything in my life. But the damage was done. The words, no matter how sincere, couldn't take back what had happened. Get out, I said firmly, turning away from her. I've heard enough. I didn't wait for her to say anything more. I watched her walk out of the house, her sobs faint in the background as she left. I knew she was broken, but the truth was, I was too. It was just that I was finally learning to live with it. The divorce process was quick, surprisingly so. Rebecca fought me for custody of Emily, of course, but it was clear from the start that she wasn't going to win. I had the evidence, the video, the text messages, everything to prove that she was unfit to care for our daughter. The judge agreed. It wasn't the victory I had imagined. The courtroom battles, the back and forth with Rebecca's lawyer, the constant reminders of everything that had gone wrong, it all took a toll. But when the ruling came through, I felt nothing but relief. Emily was mine now. And that was the only thing that truly mattered. Rebecca continued to try and reach out, sending me messages begging for another chance, hoping for some sort of reconciliation, but I ignored them. I had already given her everything, and she had thrown it away. I spent the next few months rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I focused on Emily, on giving her the stability and love she needed to heal. We created new routines, new traditions. Friday nights became movie nights, and Saturday mornings were filled with pancakes and laughter. Slowly but surely, we rebuilt what had been broken. And as for David? I never spoke to him again. He sent a few apologetic messages, but they went unanswered. What could I say to him? Nothing. He wasn't my brother anymore. Not after what he did. I had learned the hard way that trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. And as I looked at Emily, my heart swelled with pride. She was my world now. I would protect her with everything I had. It wasn't the life I had imagined for us, but it was ours. And for the first time in months, I could finally breathe. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.